Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to my kitchen. Today is Sunday, it's August 27th. Today we're going to do the plum coffee cake update that we didn't do yesterday. You guys saw the video I posted on Sunday and it wasn't a cooking video, unfortunately, just due to some things changed. Before we get into what we're doing today with the plum coffee cake, I'm just going to give you a very fast update. I was editing the videos, obviously, that I posted today and went back and watched Saturday's video. And I don't think I told you what we're going to do with the lights. And the one thing that this kitchen does not have is really good lighting. It has lighting, but it's not the best lighting. So I'm going to change the light that's above my head, and I would tip you guys over, but you actually are on the camcorder today versus my iPhone. Over the kitchen table, that light's going to change into a ceiling fan light. And then this one, I'm going to change the layout that this looks and put something nicer in and potentially much brighter. So that was just the update for the kitchen. We're going to be working on the kitchen, like I said, when you saw the videos that posted on Sunday. It's going to be different because things are going to start to change in the kitchen day by day. So, probably starting this weekend, like I said, I am taking Monday and Tuesday, or no, I probably will take Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday off of this week, actually. So we'll be getting the kitchen ready to go. So anyway, that was just a quick update on the kitchen. Let's get into this recipe, and if you forgot what I'm doing, we're making the Italian prune coffee cake today. So I have my recipe. And in this recipe, you're going to need 1/2 cup of milk, 1 package of dry yeast, or 1/2 ounce. If you're going to do a bigger version of this coffee cake, like a cookie sheet version, you're going to need a little bit more. You're going to up this by about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of each ingredient, except for the yeast. You might need 2 packages of dry yeast, or a little bit more than 1 ounce of active fresh yeast. You're going to need 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 4 large eggs, 1/2 cup of sugar, which is the 1/2 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of butter. That's 1 stick of butter. And then you're going to need 1.5 pounds of the Italian prune plums. And you're going to cut them in half and you're going to pit them. You do not need to peel them. We'll get into that when we start doing that. And then what I do is I put a brown sugar mixture on top of the coffee cake when it's baking, and I'll show you that in a bit. So I think maybe in yesterday's video at the end of it, or the one that you guys saw on Sunday, I talked about how my grandmother does this. And this is my grandmother's baking sheet, and if you look at it on the inside, it used to be a non-stick, and you can see how loved this baking sheet was. This baking sheet is probably at least 35 to 40 years old. I remember this baking sheet as a kid, and it's made a lot of delicious stuff in my lifetime. I'm not using this today because it is getting old. It's also not a non-stick anymore. But if you're going to do the plum coffee cake, you can definitely do a 9x13. As a matter of fact, this recipe makes a 9x13. I'm going to do the bigger version of it, and I am going to use just the ordinary cookie sheet, my silver cookie sheet, which is bigger, and I'm going to do comparisons so you guys can see the size difference. And you can tell this is bigger. So, how much difference does this recipe need to be? not as much as you think. You just need to increase the ingredients just a little bit. You don't need to go crazy with it. So, let's get started with this recipe. Of course, you know you need to make your sponge. That's the first thing that you have to do, and there are so many videos of this being done. You can look at the dumpling video to figure this out. You can look at the Hoska, the donuts that are posted. So, what we're going to do is that we're going to warm a little bit of milk, and then we're going to stir in the yeast. We're going to cover it with a cloth and leave it in a warm place. You can also use the proofer. We're going to do that. Now, this recipe takes half a cup of milk. So what I'm going to do with the yeast mixture is I'm going to flip you guys around, and this is going to be a little bit different, and I apologize if you're shaking. This is actually, like I said, the camcorder. Today I decided to film on the camcorder versus filming on the iPhone. And hopefully you guys can hear me and that the film is not too distorted. So I'm just going to take a little bit of our milk. I'm going to move you guys. Actually, well, Shadow is in the middle. I'm just going to take a little bit of milk. And you don't want to go crazy when you warm it. You don't need to go gung-ho with the warming. Just a little bit to warm it. 30 seconds should do it. The more milk you need, the longer it's going to take to warm. But rule of thumb, 30 minutes. And again, you're going to do the finger test to make sure that your finger doesn't come out. You're not pulling it out right away. So you're just going to do the milk, the yeast, and you can put a little bit of sugar in it. Now this is going to be different from the dumplings. So if you need to go back and see how I do the yeast mixture, it's not exactly the same as the dumplings was, because the dumplings you put flour in the mixture. You don't need to do that with this one. And my milk's just a little bit too warm, so if your milk is a little bit too warm, all you need to do is add just a smidge of cold milk, and that will get it down to a room temperature. You don't want to burn your yeast, because that will kill yeast. So I'm going to stop the video for a second. I'm going to go grab my yeast. I'll be right back. Okay, and I'm back just like magic. I also had to get a few other things out. I'm just going to move some stuff over so that we have it at the ready. I'm going to actually move you guys down. You might shake just a little bit, and I do apologize for this. You guys all know where you guys usually go, and I'm going to actually do something a little bit different today. Oop. Okay, I'm going to put you guys up. And I think I'm going to angle you guys a little bit further back. There we go. All right. I'm going to turn you guys just a little bit. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so move that back. I've got my yeast right here. You guys are a little bit above. You guys won't see the very end of the thing, but I got the yeast here. I'm using the same brick of yeast that we used for when we did the dumplings. I'm just going to use that half. I bought out another package of yeast as just in case we need some more yeast. And to this, like I said, I'm just going to add a little bit of sugar. Yeast loves sugar. It needs to eat on something. And then I have a fork. What we do is we're just going to smooth out the yeast. and get it to go. Now, if you're going to do the same thing you did with the dumplings, if you have a toaster oven that has a proof setting, you're going to want to cover your yeast mixture. Now, the recipe says cover with cloth. Obviously, when you put it in a proofer, you don't want to cover it with cloth. You want to cover it with plastic wrap. So, and I'm just sort of melting the yeast in. And I'm going to step off the camera for a second. I'm just going to get some cling wrap, and I need to go over the toaster oven. Unfortunately, you guys won't see this because the toaster oven is on the other side of the room. I'm still figuring out, when we do the remodel for the kitchen, how to lay out the kitchen a little bit better. So I'm just turning my proofer on, and I'm gonna put our yeast mixture in the proofer for a few minutes. So while that's in the proofer, we can get started with the rest of the thing. Now, this is just the crust part of the coffee cake. And speaking of the crust part, I'm going to bring you guys over. I'm not as embarrassed to have my house being walked through, because you guys have left me wonderful, wonderful comments. And I'm sorry a change of light for this. But I'm going to grab our brown sugar down. I forgot to do that. And this part is optional. You don't have to put a brown sugar topping on your coffee cake, but I just find that this gives the coffee cake a little bit more oomph when you make it, and it tastes really good. I don't remember. It's been a very, very long time, and unfortunately my grandmother has been gone almost... Well, it's been 11 years this year since she passed away. It's probably been maybe 15 to 20 years since she made a prune coffee cake or a plum coffee cake. So I don't remember if she did do a brown sugar topping on it. I know she usually, when you serve the coffee cake, you could put a little dollop of Cool Whip or a whip topping on it. You could also do confectionery sugar, and if you don't know what confectionery sugar is, it's powdered sugar. You can also have it with the brown sugar, and we're going to do a brown sugar with a little bit of butter and crumble that on top, and it's going to make the coffee cake really good. So while the yeast is proofing, before you start measuring out any of your flour ingredients, again, I tell you very simply, don't measure out your ingredients until you know whether or not the dough or the yeast is going to rise. Once you see the movement with your yeast, then you can proceed. So what we're going to do is we're going to start getting our plums ready. And I'm excited for this new table because it's got its own storage space underneath it, which should be really, really good for me for the kitchen. And of course, if I get the pantry that we're looking at, we're going to do this. So how many peaches, oh my goodness, how many plums you need for this recipe will depend on the size of your pan. If you're going to do a 9 by 13, you're probably going to want maybe close to 15 to 20 of the plums. And you're going to want to make sure that you take off the stems and that one. So if I'm going to bring you guys in close, if you see this little pointy stick part right up front, and I'm going to point to it, I'm going to bring you guys in a little bit closer. Well, if I bring it in too close, you can see it right here. You just want to pull that off. And then in the colander, you just want to stick your plums in. And you want to check your plums and make sure that none of the plums are soft and mushy. If they're soft and mushy or they're starting to rot, throw those out. Take those out. You don't want those in your nice coffee cake. You might be wondering or asking yourself, well, if you're not going to peel the Italian prune plums, what are you going to do? Well, this is getting them ready to be washed, because you do need to wash and dry your plums before you cook them. And these are nice plums. Around here in Illinois, only one grocery store around my area carries the Italian prune plums. I've never seen them in any other grocery store around me, and it's usually a big fight to see who can get to them first. Between me and another lady who happens to be, she's of German descent, and she makes the same coffee cake that I make. Only I think hers is a little bit different version, because the German one is just a little bit different, but she and I always, it's a race to see who gets to the plums first, and this year she beat me by a couple of hours. But there were plenty of plums for both of us. I know last year, well, no, actually 2 years ago, when we were in the midst of the COVID vaccine, plums were really hard to get in, and she and I had a not really a run-in, but we laughed because both of us were trying to buy a huge amount of plums, and of course my grocery store only got X amount, so we ended up having to split them, and then I got to them a little bit sooner than she did, so I got my plums for the year. So I'm not going to overfill this. I'm just going to fill it like this. What we're going to do is we're just going to rinse them with cold water. You don't want to use the warm water, just the cold water to rinse them. That gets any of the coating off of them. Sometimes you'll feel the pesticide that they used in the orchard with them. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to stop the camera for a second, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I have most of my plums. I have some plums set aside because I'm going to do possibly the 9x13 coffee cake a little bit later. And this is a pretty quick coffee cake. The total time for this coffee cake is only about maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours tops. Because you don't need to let your dough rise all that quickly. It's actually supposed to be a thinner dough, so you don't need to do a lot of work with that. I'm just looking over at the proofer, and my yeast is actually working, so we can get going with this next step. I'm going to take my large bowl, I'm going to move my smaller bowls off to the side. And just grabbing out another measuring cup. It's a beautiful, beautiful day here in Illinois. It's actually not a cloud in the sky. The humidity level has dropped to the point where I have the doors open for breeze. This is the first time in over 3 weeks that I've actually been able to turn off the air conditioning, and it's a really, really, really beautiful day. Okay, so we're going to measure out our flour. This calls for 2 cups of flour. And you know I'm going to do this, I'm going to double this, so I'm going to use 4 cups of flour. Now this recipe calls for 4 eggs, and I think the 4 eggs is perfect. You don't need to necessarily double the eggs. If you are going to double the recipe, I would suggest increasing the eggs by 2. So since the recipe calls for 4, we'll use 6 eggs in this recipe, but I don't think you need to do 8 eggs. I think that's way too much eggs for this recipe. And what we're going to do is we're just gonna measure out our flour, and you guys all know how to do the scoop and method. So that was cup number 1. Cup number 2. Cup number 3 is coming up. And cup number 4. Oh, and like I said, we're going to double this. So we're going to do, I'm going to do cup number, I think that was cup number 4. 5. And cup number 6. Now cup number, if you do double it, keep a cup off to the side where you're not using it necessarily in the recipe. I always keep 1 cup of flour on the side because you're going to need it when you need the dough and stuff. And you can do this recipe on the mixer if you need to. Unfortunately, my book keeps shutting, but I have it bookmarked. Okay, so pour the flour in a large bowl and sprinkle on the salt, whisk the eggs as well. Pour the milk mixture, the egg mixture into the flour, mixing well. Mix the sugar and butter together well until they form a rough cream. Mix the sugar and butter into the dough until all is well incorporated. Cover the dough with cloth and let it sit in a warm place for about 45 minutes. You're going to preheat the oven to 375. So let's go ahead and do that. And my oven is exactly where I need it to be. I'm going to move my flour over though. Okay, so the eggs, sugar, and butter. So I'm going to use 2 sticks of butter. And since I am doubling this, I'm going to use a little bit more sugar. I'm going to use a cup of sugar. And it'll be it'll be interesting to see if we use all of the sugar. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit close. I'm looking to see how much time I've spent recording. And we're going to measure out our milk. Since I used about 1/2 cup, I'm just going to put in maybe 1 cup of milk. I don't need to quite double it. Okay, and my yeast is doing good. It is coming to the top. I'm going to stop the video for a few minutes. I'll be right back.